It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 17. This is your host, Chris Blanchard. My guest today is Greg Garbos. Greg brings his training and experience in conventional engineering to his work as a small farmer and with small farmers. He's the owner and co-founder of Four Season Tools, which is a greenhouse and horticulture supply company that also provides farm design consulting. He's also the owner and founder of City Bitty Farm, a grower of microgreens for Kansas City area restaurants. Greg and I dig into using intentional decision-making as a basis for developing a farm around sound principles. We talk a little bit about record keeping, and we really just kind of look at this whole idea of how do you build a profitable farm. I think it's a really fun episode. I really enjoyed my interview with Greg, and I think you will too. Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Osborne Seed Company, founded by seed professionals and dedicated to serving professional growers of all scales. Osborne Seed provides quality seeds, excellent customer service, and a fantastic selection. OsborneSeed.com. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Fertrell, a friend of nature since 1946. No matter your level of experience, Fertrell has the products and knowledge to help you grow healthy, natural plants and animals. Fertrell.com. Good morning, Greg, and welcome to the podcast.
Chris Blanchard, what a pleasure.
It's so great. It's so great to have you here. I really appreciate your making time. It doesn't show up in when people get this in their feeds, but we're actually recording this on a Sunday morning. And so I just want to say, I really appreciate you being flexible and working around all the things that we both got going on to make this happen this morning. Thank you very, very much.
Well, Chris, as a farmer, the Sunday mornings commonly are work days. So
yes, I know. So, Greg, you've got your fingers in a lot of different pots. You've got you're the owner and founder of City Bitty Microgreens Farm. You're also one of the founders and you're the owner of Four Season Tools, which is a greenhouse and farm supply company. And you guys also do farm design and consulting. Can you kind of flesh out the picture of what you've got going on in your various businesses right now for us?
Well, it's funny. I think that I do have my hands in a lot of different pots, but I think the reality is it's all very intertwined in the mission that we're trying to do. I personally have a passion for skill-based service, is what I like to call it. So taking whatever talents and resources you have and trying to make the most difference you could with them. And it's been a lifelong quest of mine through kind of finding my career in that space. So my dad used to be an aerospace engineer and my mom was a minister. So I was, kind of had a sharp analytical mind, but a desire to do something useful with it in the world. And it's something I just took very seriously at an early age. So, trying different things is just, as an engineer and, being schooled as a mechanical engineer, I've had different opportunities in how to do service, So if I was a hairdresser, rather than go and sling a hammer for Habitat for Humanity, which is a great organization, but, that person better served maybe doing the hair for underprivileged girls for their prom, right? And so spending time in corporate America doing fuel cell research and green building and weatherization of homes and all these different things, when I found food, what was amazing is the other kind of philosophy that I now live my life by, and that's the sphere of influence that I can have. So as one individual, I have the opportunity to make a lot of difference in this space. And one of the wonderful things about agriculture, particularly sustainable agriculture, particularly small-scale sustainable agriculture, is such a small and specific industry. And this industry is going to grow, several orders of magnitude and still only be 0.1% of the big guys. And I think that, the enterprises that I find myself in are all kind of tied around the fact that I want to change the way that we grow food, and I want to change the technology and systems thinking that we have and how we grow our food in a sustainable way. So I didn't answer your question specifically, but I think that that's what, holistically I do is I try to, hands-on experiment, design, and then implement farming solutions to make sustainable agriculture a reality and an economic reality for people.
I really like that. I really like that idea of using what you called your sphere of influence and the skills that you've got. I think that's a real motivator for a lot of folks that have gotten into the food and farming business in recent years, is that it's a matter of saying, what can I actually do? How can I very practically implement some of these bigger philosophical ideas? And I think that's great. So tell us about Four Season Tools. How did you get started in that business? And now, again, if just to be clear, Four Season Tools is a greenhouse manufacturing and engineering
company, and you guys also do farm supplies for small market farmers, and you guys also do this farm design and consulting piece. How did you end up there?
Well, so, going back to kind of my history, I ended up going to Duke in North Carolina and for undergrad and grad school. And I ended up graduating with both degrees in 4 years. So I was kind of in this weird place in my life where I had a lot of opportunities in front of me. So I looked at things like Dean Kamen from Deca Research and had a job offer from GE Medical. And I ended up taking a job at Sustainable Mobility Technologies, which was Ford's hydrogen fuel cell research division. So I went out there and kind of played corporate America for a little while and realized how difficult it is to do skill-based service in a large corporation. As part of my employment contract, I was actually able to negotiate that I had every Friday off to do community service for the company. And looking back on it, I still can't believe that I was able to do that. But even with that, literally 20% of my time I was spending trying to leverage Ford to do community service. It was just so hard to actually really get anything real done. Us people who are in farming lots of times are goal-oriented people, are driven by success and driven by actually getting things accomplished. And I'm definitely one of those people. So through that philanthropy, I was actually able to design some vehicles for people with disabilities. And through that was actually able to get introduced to a team of venture capitalists that were down in Atlanta, Georgia. And so some philanthropy that I did at Ford actually what ended up opening the doors for me to kind of get into like I said, entrepreneurship or owning my own business, right? It allowed me to step up cash in my chips in life to get to a point where I was actually able to work for myself as opposed to other people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Through that transition, the gentleman that I worked for, I ran a $10 million technical sales company for these guys. And they knew Elliot Coleman. And said, hey, there's this guy in Maine, and he's got these rakes and these shovels and these hoes that make farming better, and we want you to go up there and look at it. So I went up there with two of my friends from Duke, a PhD mechanical engineer and an environmental science person, and we went up there, and it was the first vegetable farm I ever stepped on in my entire life. I grew up in southern New Hampshire. It wasn't that far from where I grew up, about 5 hours east, and I met a really nice guy named Elliot, and Barbara cooked us lobster. It was a wonderful experience, but I had no idea who they were, so I came back to Kansas City and said, as part of my own due diligence, started going to like local food, events and things like that. And I met a gentleman by the name of Ted Carey, who was very instrumental in my career. And Ted's the guy who created hightunnels.org. One of the guys who's really been involved in pushing season extension in high tunnels in the Midwest. And he was out of K-State University and basically built the high tunnel program at the Olathe Research Center. And he bumps into me and he's just like, he did what? You have no idea. He's like, Elliot Coleman, you know who that is? I'm like, no, he's a really, really nice guy. He's like, no, he's the Elliot Coleman. And I was like, what? So like I had no concept. And then he invited me out to his place the next day. And then the third farm I was on was Cultivate Kansas City, which is now one of the top urban farming ag nonprofits in the country, and met Catherine Kelly and Daniel Dermitzel. And Daniel had built some homemade movable high tunnels from in the 80s based on Elliot's first writings in the New Organic Grower. And it started to kind of click for me that maybe this is something that is worth pursuing. So what's interesting is that even though my career was going in a very positive direction, what the lateral step that happened for me to farming had more to do with the fact of me sticking with that philanthropy, because it was the philanthropy that I had done in my career that actually allowed me to make this transition more than the typical professional aspect of my career.
And so from there, you saw this need for mobile high tunnels. That's really where Four Season Tools got its start, right?
Well, I think we got to do a consulting project or we're looking at a consulting project for a woman named Ann Willoughby, a really amazing brand identity and graphic design person in Kansas City. And she had this property and, really hit it off with them. She's actually one of the first people that I met when I moved to Kansas City. And I had no idea that she was the person of significance that she is. So a lot of this is obviously just networking and finding people. But, we looked at doing a consulting project for her on her property. And by the time time we were done, we were estimating about a $250,000 project, and about $5,000 of that was, tools, the collinear hose and the 6-row seeders and the 4-row seeders. But then the other, big, then like $100,000 of it was, greenhouses or high tunnels, both fixed and movable, based on the concept that we were pushing. And then the other 100 was basically stuff we couldn't touch, like infrastructure development and grading and big volumes of compost and soil being brought in. And I just, we made a pie chart for them of where they were going to spend all their money. And it just saw this tiny little wedge for tools and this gigantic wedge for greenhouses. And we just turned the corner right there and never looked back. So the company's called Four Season Tools because it was created with the belief of bringing new tools into the business or into our scene. And I think that's what we still do, right? But our tools just now are bigger and are 1,500 square feet to thousands of square feet on tracks and skids that move around. And so we still sell the small tools and the things like that. But for me, it's really about the system, is that if you're going to buy a high tunnel, you also need the things that are going to make you financially productive inside of a high tunnel. People are getting these NRCS grants, building a 30 by 48, roughly a 1,500 square foot building, and then putting them in there and not planting them anywhere near as dense as they should, and not thinking about, greens with 6-row seeders and things. You're paying so much money per square foot in that covered area that you need to have the tools and the system and the approach to allow yourself to actually get a return on investment from that structure.
Yeah, even if it is with the cost share through NRCS, it's still a substantial investment, not just in money, but in terms of time and energy as well. And you really do want to try to make the most out of that. And that seems like something that, as you and I have talked over the years, Greg, it's a real theme in our discussions, is how to think about things so that you're getting the most out of them. And that's something that I think you've really taken and applied with City Bitty Farm.
Yeah, I think so. Michael Pollan buys a cow to learn about meat, right? I think that as a person who is designing and implementing solutions for farms, the reason that my wife and I just decided to start our farm, was the realization that how much we would learn in the process, right? And at the time, it felt very very simple decision. Be like, oh, we're just going to start a farm so that we know what it's like, And looking back on it, we should have taken that decision more seriously, I think, right? Because it was a very, 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 very long-term, massive life decision, and it was up there with having kids and getting married to my wonderful wife. It's such an important decision because it's such a consuming profession. So fortunately for me, there's something to show for it. When we designed greenhouses or designed my own greenhouse, and then realized that bench efficiency was going to be like one of the most driving points in how much money we could make out of that space. Right. Then that became, very, very crucial in how we designed our space to make sure that was possible. When we started paying for labor, financial investments and things like trolley systems that speed up your labor become very, very smart economic decisions. Right. So, we're trying to build the business and what we've done. And I think that attention to detail, even for me at what seems like a very, very small scale, right, has allowed us to have the success that we've had. But, because we're a completely quality driven business growing specialty greens for high-end restaurants. And it takes a certain person and personality to want to do that. I harvest 104 times a year. I deliver 104 times a year. I sow 104 times a year, twice a week, every week. We're delivering on New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve. But because I'm willing to do that better and harder than anybody else, there's a lot of business out there for me, and I don't see the growth of my particular business stopping. But, what the innovation we've been able to come out with bench efficiency and roll out benches and trolley systems and flip up benches and rainwater capture. And I've got radiant heating systems in my benches that are thrashing and slashing my winter heating bills, and I'm setting financial records that are only being met with our cohorts in Colorado and Washington State, but I'm doing it legally, in Missouri with microgreens. They can do it in 3 harvests in a year, right? And we can joke around about marijuana production, but it is absolutely 100% part of our scene right now, and it's not going away. If I can move us towards something that I think is really mentally fun to think about is regenerative versus depletive farming, right? And I'm going to take these terms from Edwin Marty. And if people don't know who Edwin Marty is, he's one of my favorites in the industry for sure. He was the guy behind Eat South and a lot of the urban farming initiatives down in Alabama, and now he's actually the food policy coordinator for Austin, Texas. He wrote a book called Breaking Through Concrete, but he's like a sociologist or an anthropologist turned urban farmer turned policymaker or policy influencer, right? And it's a wonderful, wonderful career that he's had, but he doesn't like, we get caught up in terms of organic and natural and all this stuff. And he likes to think of them much more simply in the context of there are only two things. There are regenerative systems and there are depletive systems, right? And I think that we're having an agriculture crisis, or there's a pending agriculture crisis, because so many of our systems are depletive, right? And I think that that's something that I've really had to get my head wrapped around. It's something that I've really learned by being a farmer is that, these inputs and outputs really, really matter. When Elliot is basically one of the people who brought soil blocking to the United States with these soil blockers, there's very little input. You start with a medium that's compatible for soil blockers, and you're not using these trays and these other things. And every time you can flash an input out of your operation, your efficiency in theory can go up, but definitely the manufacturing complexity, of your operation goes down. So when we're talking about the medium and inputs and outputs of operation, one of the real takeaways for me as a farmer now is material handling is like one of the most critical parts of farming. How are you going to get your stuff from one place to another place at a scale that makes sense for your business? And I think you can make an argument that the materials handling is really all we do in farming. I mean, even the question of like plowing the soil is a materials handling game. You're moving the soil around. It's all about movement and motion and doing those kinds of things in the most efficient way possible. Yeah, and I think that I totally agree. I totally agree. Right, and that's where your scale comes in. Right, is how you can do material handling at different scales is a really important part of that. When you sold me your mini pallet system, that changed my life for the better. My back started feeling better every morning. I started sleeping better, because I had a system that was appropriate for my scale. And if anybody find a picture of that, Chris, or put a link up there, because that thing is really, one of the better ideas that's actually hit my farm and immediately made an impact. It's just little small pallets you put on the ground, and we've got a lot of concrete in my site in particular, so it's really easy to move things around on that concrete. But things get wet, and just getting those things up an inch off the ground makes sense anyways. But it's taking all the benefits of lift jacks and stuff like that, and bringing them down into that small scale. And I bought your pallet jack also, and we use it every time compost comes. And those two things and buying that platform made a difference. So when we get back to the regenerative farming, the inputs and outputs are very, very important, and how they fit into your business model is very, very important, because you pay for your inputs and you can either pay or financially reap the rewards of your outputs, right? So one of the things that, I'm being taught by some of the people that are teaching me farming, right, is that maybe I'm trying too hard to get good compost, and that maybe instead what I need to do is just get the best, organic matter compost I can get really, really affordably locally, like, leaf waste and things like that. And that there's other ways to then bring that to the level I need it to be before I use it, with like worm casting, teas, and things like that. So, I'm really fascinated right now about this fact of like getting anything you can that's good stuff really locally, really, really cheap, right? And then make it good in a different way, right? And then that different way can be a liquid something, whether it's a soy-based enzymes or fish emulsions or teas and stuff like that. It's allowing, it's kind of like the hydroponic growers do, but the hydroponic growers can't do it in a regenerative way. But us as compost-based farmers, we can, right? And I don't think that liquid feeding is bad, right? You have to do it intelligently or whatever. But I think what I'm trying to say is that as a farmer, we need to find the waste around us and turn it into something that's really, really good. But in that process, I want to borrow it for 2 weeks so that I can sell $10,000 of microgreens this month, And right. I think that there's something to that.
And that's where when you bring up like that compost input, that's a huge thing for you, because you're filling a 10-20 tray with compost and other materials, sowing a crop in there. 2 weeks later, you're harvesting the crop, and then that that you've used up that input, right?
Yeah, I think that, in general, that's how I would grow arugula or Tokyo Macana or any of your Asian greens. Things can take up to 6 to 8 weeks on some of the fancier varieties. I mean, we're importing, specific celery seed from Asia because of some color it has and how it looks good in a mirepoix mix. I mean, once you become a specialty grower, it's just la land. But what we are doing is, you're exactly right. We're bringing in media and then we're putting it right into a tray. So, I think farms, if you want to talk to someone about what their farming operation is like, you can ask them some very, very simple questions and you learn a lot about them. What are you selling? Are you in vegetables or pork or whatever, and then, do you hire labor? And the farms that hire labor are completely different than the farms that don't hire labor. So I buy Cosmo Blue compost and then we take it and, I know that I could cut that with like 50% peat, but the labor cost of doing that doesn't offset the savings of the peat. So even though I could use, lower throttle stuff or cheaper kind of stuff, for me, it's a financial decision around labor, not a product decision, right? And I think that when you run an operation that you really do need for the math to make sense, you find yourself doing legitimate design kind of criteria in order to allow that thing to make sense. And paying for labor is a huge part of our business. For me, every dollar that comes into my business, right? I've seen operations like mine operate, 33 to 66% or 75% even of their revenue goes directly into labor. And we haven't started talking about, compost and heating and seeds or any of that stuff. So literally every dollar that comes in, 66% of it goes right to labor. And you haven't gotten everything else yet. So it's the most labor intensive form of vegetable production that I've ever seen, but I think you also get the reward from it because of that relationship, you're able to create jobs, and hire people and have a staff, because, it just works that way. I'm not operating a single machine that one person can run and do 1 million acres of corn. We're literally starting, every seed touches our hand and goes into a tray, and every microgreen tray can have hundreds, if not thousands, of plants inside of it. So when I start paying for labor and I have to design my operation around labor, and then that's really what it is. So we talk about material handling, we talk about labor. Those are exactly the same things, right? It costs money, time, and energy to move things around, right? So when you design an operation, you design your operation completely around labor, because everything else financially is completely insignificant in the context of the order of magnitude that labor is at the small scale that you and I typically are talking about.
That's a really interesting concept, because, and I pay attention on various listservs and Facebook discussion groups, and labor is it's a real interest of mine, but it's a constant bugaboo for people. How to just recently, there's been a big discussion on the CSA discussion group on Facebook about how to hire good people, how to actually take workers and get them to do the work that needs to be done and to do it quickly and well. And it seems to me that you've really worked on that concept, not only facilitating efficient work through the tools and the layouts that you have, but also facilitating efficient work through the kinds of training and decision-making processes that you have your workers go through.
Well, it reminds me of I have a very good friend named Chris Sweeney. And if anybody ever needs like some legitimate large scale, machining done, he's a great machinist out of New Hampshire, but one of my best friends. And he told me one time, he said, if you want to figure out the fastest way to do a job, give the job to the laziest person.
Yeah.
Because they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure out the laziest way to do it. Right. And lazy and efficiency are two really, really similar things. And I think that, I look at my farm, if someone puts something down on the ground, I yell at them. I saw a biometric study one time that said even something 1 foot off the ground, the huge reduction in the physical demands of picking that thing back up again. And I think that you just have to be, conscious of the fact that, there are actually 4 legs to sustainability, right? We talk about, the obvious ones, the environmental and the social aspect, which is frankly why most people are in farming, and definitely why a lot of the nonprofit farms exist, right? Then you've got the economic sustainability, and I would argue that more farms get that wrong than get it right. When you have farms that are, completely designed around volunteer labor and grant money and donations or migrant labor or, cheap labor through, Amish and Mennonite communities, through illegal labor, through all those different things, like that's not an economically sustainable system, right? The fourth part of sustainability, now that I've been a farmer for 5 years and my body is giving out, right, is the personal sustainability. And that comes in, your physical ability, that comes in your mental ability, your emotional ability, your ability to balance your relationships with your loved ones, right? And I think that that's another place where farmers get it really wrong, and me included. My personal and family life has taken massive sacrifice to do what I do, and then to be doing what I do because I'm doing it to help people and not doing it to, I want the business to make money, but, and it will hopefully someday, right? But the reality is that we do it because we love it and we care, So when we talk about these efficiencies and we talk about this stuff, if you save 10 minutes a day, that's the difference between potentially like having dinner with my son Orion or not, and I think that we need to see the personal sustainability aspects when it comes to labor efficiency, material efficiency, scale appropriate design, and things along those lines.
So, Greg, let's talk a little bit about scale, because I think this is really an interesting topic, because it's something that's very, very hard to get a hold of. And you've got Four Season Tools you guys are engineered towards small farms. That's really your focus. In fact, I think your website is smallfarmtools.com. Is the URL that you guys go to, and City Bitty Farm it's a small farm. You're dealing with a very limited number of square feet. You have a small crew. You're pushing a lot of product through there. There's a lot of dollars flowing through your business, but it's relative to agriculture as a whole, it's tiny. And I think one of the funny things that happens with farming, especially when we're dealing with local agriculture in the Midwest, is that what we think of here as a large farm doesn't even begin to touch what a small farm is out in the Central Valley of California. And so the scale issue tends to be really squirrely. So I'd like to hear some more discussion about how you're thinking about making these four legs of sustainability work on a small scale operation that really is so stepped outside of the conventional agriculture paradigm.
Well, I guess I would like to split that discussion up into kind of two things. One is just I'll quickly talk about the scale that I'm at and why, right? And then two, I'll talk about the three scales in vegetable reduction that I've seen that make sense. Actually, why don't I do those in backwards order, right? So the three scales that kind of make sense are, I'm just going to say the gardener scale, right? So, there's a lot of discussion about farmers versus gardeners and whatever. And again, I differentiate all of that. I don't care the term between people that pay for labor and people that don't pay for labor, right? So let's say everybody who doesn't pay for labor, right? That is just a scale that I personally am not so involved in. It's kind of more the master gardener kind of stuff, in my opinion. And people can definitely make a living doing a little bit, but usually the farm isn't being paid for, the mortgage isn't being paid for out of the revenue at the farmer's market, right? Then you've got the small market farms, the people who are actually making their living and doing it. And those people can be really successful in that, 1, 2, 3 acre stuff with the right, with high tunnels, season extension, tools like 6-row seeders and tilters from Johnny's and things like that, right? And I've seen, Elliot included, people who are doing, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 an acre at that scale, right? Then the people that try to get a little bit bigger, typically the next scale appropriate technology that would come to the farm would be, 2-wheel tractors or walk-behind tractors, right? So we're not talking about a tiller, we're talking about a small farm device that is a PTO, so you can take your implement off and put on different implements. So you can switch between a bed former and a tiller or whatever, and then you get rid of the kind of Elliott Coleman intensive split spacing, and you can go up to 2, 3, 4, 5 acres, right, and still hit some impressive numbers. You can be in that $60,000-$70,000 an acre range, and I think that that for most people is the biggest a farm will ever get. Then there's a big break, right? And then you go up to the scale that, Chris, you were operating at, right? Or Pete Johnson on the Vermont-Canadian border, right? Or Michael Kilpatrick in upstate New York, who's now the agriculture specialist for Four Season Tools. These guys are crushing it at that bigger scale, but they all kind of have a similar model, right? In the sense that when it comes to the equipment, you go to a farm like that, there's a cultivating tractor that's dialed in and set up for cultivation. There's a separate tractor that's got a watering wheel transplanter, whatever sort of transplant system it has that's dialed in for that. There's a different tractor, right, that's got kind of the utility tractor that's got the front end loader on the front and then the hitch equipment on the back to be able to use some of the other implements that they might need, like lawnmowers and stuff, right? And there's a specific tool for each job, right? And I was describing this once at a trade show in Kansas, or I was presenting in Kansas, and this woman burst into tears, and I was right in front of me. I was like, oh my God, what was that about? So, come up to her afterwards, start talking to her, and she's just like, she goes, I just wish, someone had told me that, X number of years ago, because we had a farm and we tried to go from that tiny, a couple acre scale up to about 7 acres, and they went bust in the process because they didn't go far enough. So when we're talking about market farming, I really think there's something to this 1 to 5 acre scale, and you need to scale the farmer correctly for the equipment that you have, and then this big leap up for whatever. So on my farm, we're like a total notch down from that because we're just doing controlled environment growing. We have a greenhouse and we put things in the greenhouse year round. So, last year at a 750 square feet, we pushed out over $80,000, right? And what the history for me is that when we built a tiny little greenhouse, we had a 750 square foot outbuilding. And I said, okay, well, I'll just make a greenhouse that matches. I'll build it off the end of it. And at the time I was thinking, man, if I'm making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 selling microgreens, I'd be the man. Like that would be awesome, and then all of a sudden, it takes about a year to build a farm, a year and a half to build the farm. So I'm building the farm. And then within 6 months of that, we were doing, a handful of thousands of dollars a month. Right. And then it wasn't long at all, literally at all, like within a year that we had maxed out. And so I turned to my wife and I'm just like, hey, we need more greenhouse. And she's just like, you're crazy. The first one almost killed you, and I'm like, no, we need more greenhouse. And then together, there was a 51%, 49% decision made as most compromises in marriage. And I did not get a bigger greenhouse. And I'm grateful, in retrospect, I'm really, really grateful. She was right about our moment in time, having just had a kid and things like that, we really need to, which is not the right moment. But what it forced me to do is it forced me to get a lot better. Right. So, thinking I couldn't put more than $4,000 to that greenhouse through inventing new technology like rollout benches and trolley systems and optimize, sizing our benches to our trays as opposed to getting our trays to fit on our benches. These things that to me now feel like, fundamentals of greenhouse design at the time weren't really in the industry at all, and at least on our scale in the industry. And then we got a lot better. So the math said we could fit 324 trays in the greenhouse as originally designed. And by the time we hit that January, we were doing $6,400 of sales, and we had 750 trays in the greenhouse, by using all of the vertical space and the underbench space. And it changed the way I look at greenhouses completely. Right. And so that was happening for me. And then aligned with that, we were doing a consulting project for a developer in Cambridge, looking at a rooftop farm at MIT on a parking garage. And they just didn't really know what they wanted. They're like, oh, we just know we want a greenhouse. We know we want a greenhouse. Well, what do you want to grow? I don't know. Just get us a bid for a greenhouse. And I said, no. I was like, I'm not going to bid something unless I have some idea what we're doing. And they said, well, we don't know. So they ended up hiring us as consultants because they realized they didn't even know the questions to ask. And through that process, we said, well, pick something to design this around. And this went on for weeks. And what we ended up deciding that a primary design criteria was going to be was 2 full-time employees, right? Because 2 full-time employees, right, is a good thing. There's morale associated with it. You can have people of different skill sets. Someone can quit in a huff and the farm continues to exist, right? Someone can be sick and the other person can still wash greens. To try to farm and pay for labor at a successful level and not have at least 2 employees put such a burden on that fourth leg of sustainability, the sustainability of the person trying to manage that operation, right? So, and that was a big light bulb for me. It was like, oh, wow, we shouldn't design market farms that don't have 2 full-time people that aren't the owner. And then when we really went through the economics of what it takes to do that, the number that surfaced for me was $135,000. And this is now something that I truly kind of believe in personally, and how I approach farming as a farm owner, but not necessarily the operator, right? Is that $135,000. I don't think I would advise anybody to start a market farm that isn't going to try to do at least $135,000, because there's this buy-in to agriculture. Like poker, they talk about a chip in a chair, and you can win the tournament. The chip in a chair for agriculture is everything. It's ground, it's irrigation, it's harvesting, it's wash pack, it's refrigeration, it's delivery, right? It's payroll, it's taxes, it's social media, it's website design. It's e-commerce, right? It's CSA memberships, it's legal, it's insurance, right? It's workman's compensation, it's service and maintenance of your equipment and your tools. And I'm just going to say, having seen a lot of farms and a lot of farms start that didn't make it, is I think a lot of it's because they're not shooting for this $135,000. So
now,
and it's
not that you have to start there. It's not that you have to do that in your first year. It's that's where you need to be. You have to know that there's an end point to that really. There's a lot of hustle. I remember this on my farm, and it's an interesting number to me, Greg, because in my experience, it's very similar. That when we hit about that scale, it was like things kind of loosened up a little bit. You
need for a $3,000 cooler to go out and to be able to go buy another one the next day without blinking an eyelash. Because it's such an important part of your operation. So we say that for everything that you buy in the farm, we have another number, which is 10% of the cost of that item should be put towards that item for service and maintenance. So if you buy a $20,000 greenhouse, you need $2,000 a year to maintain that. And that's true for everything on your property. And people don't budget for that, right? People buy a brand new, or the worst thing is that someone will give a grant to somebody for like a BCS 2-wheel tractor, right? And if you're going to get one, call Joel at Earth Tools. He's the man, right? But, they go and a grant will give somebody that tractor, and then the person has it, but might not be able to afford to change its oil, right? So the oil doesn't get changed and this brand new thing gets trashed. I've seen literally beautiful brand new stuff hit these farms and donations and stuff. But if you don't also give them the ability to service and maintain those things, then we're not doing a service with that,
Well, and I think even on your own farm, when you talk about that in a nonprofit environment, it's always easier to get grants for capital investments than it is for ongoing expenses. People always want to invest in the new shiny thing, but it's also, I think, in an individual's operation and in something that really is a business, it's also a lot sexier to go out and buy a tractor or a BCS or a greenhouse than it is to think about, changing the oil, greasing the zerks, replacing the tires, changing the plastic. That's all. There's no sexiness in that. There's nobody's like, oh yeah, boy, we changed the oil in the tractor. Boy, that was an exciting thing that happened in 2012. It's like, no, I bought a new tractor. That was fun. That was cool.
Well, I think so. The term for that is that I would use in the automotive industry was preventative maintenance, right? Is that you're spending the time now to save the time later. Like literally, I was at your time management speech at Moses in February, and after you talked about, you went on a spiel about preventative maintenance, right? I literally went home and knew a guy that could wrench, and I just said, you know what, it's worth it. And I paid the guy $200, and he came out for 2 days, and he just wrenched on all my equipment. Changed all the plugs, all the oil, whatever. And who knows if things need more work or less work. But for one very, very minimal investment, that guy went through, I think, roughly 19 pieces of powered equipment for me, right? And just got them all going. And that was now 4 months ago, and it's made for a smoother spring. It just has. It was a wonderful way to spend that $200.
Well, it's such an important investment. I mean, one of the things with farming is it's all about timing. Farming is all about timing. Things have to work when you need them to work. And if you don't do that preventative maintenance, they're not going to work when you need them to work.
Yeah.
So, Greg, you're talking about this scale issue, right? You said this $135,000 a year to be able to afford to have 2 full-time people on your farm in addition to the farmer. You've talked about 10% of an item cost going to maintenance. What are some of the other principles that you've seen as you've worked with farmers and on your own farm that can guide the design of a farming operation?
Yeah, I think I'd split farm design into 3 categories. The actual kind of design phase of the farm, that's the fun stuff, right? That's the throw the noodles on the cabinet wall and see what sticks. Then there's the implementation phase of the farm, and then there's the actual kind of, implementation and launch, I'll say, and then there's the operation of the farm, right? And I think that we need to be thinking about those three different things, those three completely different phases in the launch of the farm. And I think that a lot of problems are caused in trying to overlap those phases, like designing on the fly, or not knowing what you're going to plant when you could have figured it out 2 weeks ago. And then the day that you really, really need to, you're sitting there on a beautiful day and the storm's coming. You only got 3 hours, and you're trying to, hand scratch through what you're going to do. The other thing that I see that really screws up operations, and I've seen operations not make it because they got this wrong, is they try to grow and build at the same time. And I think that's a bad idea. When you capitalize a farm, you need to build the farm, complete the construction, right? And then kind of launch the farm. And it doesn't mean you can't be playing. You can't have a couple things in the ground to play with timings and stuff, but never more than like 3 of one plant. Makes a lot of sense to me. And so I'm first just going to say that I think there are 3 phases, and that it's really, really important to not, the best that you can in the situation that you're in, to not allow those things to kind of overlap. So we do a lot of farms that are literally starting. Our average, our kind of target clients are people who have been through, the process of deciding what it is they're going to do, have gotten access to farmland and the capital, and now are ready to start making the investments. I get involved typically when the farm is ready to buy their high tunnels, right? Ready to buy their, irrigation equipment and things along those lines. So, a lot of times people will call me and are way too into the design phase for me to be helpful. As an engineer and an implementer, I'm the guy that can come in once they're actually ready to do it and help them figure out kind of how to do it. So if you're okay with it, this is actually something I've been excited about. I've been excited to pick your brain about some of these things. I do believe that within the design implementation operation of my farm, a lot of the characteristics that we put into place are things that I've learned from you and your presentations and your operations. So, to start with design, I'm just going to say scale. I think scale is the number one decision. Do you want to do 20 acres? Do you want to do 3 acres? And I think along with scale, and when you're talking about things like that, you have to be very, very honest about the resources that you have. And those resources are time, financial, capital, land, equipment, all those kinds of things that, what do you actually need to do to pull it off? So the first thing I would like to talk about is the difference between farmland and land. And now I've been to plenty of trade shows, plenty of events, and you just, really, really enthusiastic person will come up and just be like, I've got access to land. I've got this amazing land, and it's got this and this and this and this. And I say, do you have frost-free hydrants on site? Well, no. Do you have access to natural gas or propane? Well, no. Do you have wash pack on site? Well, no. Do you have refrigeration on site? Well, no. Do you have the ability to drive a delivery vehicle to a place where it can safely unload? Well, no. Do you have, a workshop space for equipment and maintenance and things? Well, no. Well, that's great. You've got really, really wonderful land, but you don't have farmland, right? And I think that we need to be starting with farmland. There's so much farmland out there, places that already have barns and outbuildings, and this belief that small scale food is so important that I can be in coastal Maine and start a farm. I saw a girl that was really discouraged. The local food scene is just, you can't get into it. There's just not enough demand. Well, you live in coastal Maine where the per capita small scale organic farmer is through the roof,
right.
Move to upstate New York, move to Ohio. People in regular professions, right, move to where the business is good, right? And we need to understand as farmers, we need to do that. We need to travel the world and do woofers and do interns, learn on somebody else's dollar, see all the different opportunities that are out there. But the farms that I see that are successful, like Eric Frank's, my microgreen mentor outside of Philadelphia, he moved his farming operation from Oregon to Philadelphia because he saw the fact that it was close to urban environments for land prices that could get him the farm that he always dreamed of having, right? But can still pay for the price of the product that he was going to grow, right? And I think that people really get that wrong, right? About this land and farmland, and the fact that the convenience of the property is not the decision-making purpose for the property. You might be better selling off this beautiful piece of land that you've always thought you were going to turn into a farm to get the capital to go to a place and find a place that has all the resources that you want. Like, I've been talking with a developer in Kansas City, and one of the things he says, he goes, the key to redevelopment is to find a building that used to be what you now want and turn it back into what you want it to be. So we're talking about, manufacturing site, right? And he's just like, the dumbest thing you can do is just buy a building and try to turn it into a manufacturing site. We need to find a place that used to be a steel shop, that's got ceiling cranes, and it's got 3-phase power and all these different things. And then we can go in there, and in a month, we can polish it and turn it on, as opposed to spending the next 18 months and doing this. So I think that the design and the site selection are probably, the scale and the site selection are probably the most important thing to do on the front end.
Greg, I actually think this is a really interesting point here, that it's not even just that it's farmland, right? It's that it's market farmland.
Yes.
If you want to have, it's one thing if what you want to do is raise grass-fed beef for people's freezers. And it's another thing if what you want to do is to raise fresh vegetables, because it's one thing if you want to raise 1,000 acres of corn. There's an entirely different set of considerations than if you want to raise radishes for a living. And I think the same thing's true in the scale discussion. Asking what it is that you want out of the farm is such an important question, because I think a lot of people they don't want a farm. They don't want a market farm. What they want is a market garden. They want to make a little bit of money in their backyard, or they want to have it be a part-time enterprise that is actually supported by somebody working off farm, because that's what feels comfortable. That's what feels like appropriate risk. That's what feels like an appropriate amount of work. And that's fine. But I think it's really important to be clear about that distinction between being somebody who's making some money on a piece of land and somebody who's actually being a market farmer and is making a living on the market farm, and the kinds of locations and resources and even the kinds of land that you need to make that work. I remember talking to Trish Bross at Luna Circle Farm. They market at the farmers market in Madison. I can't remember where she's located right now, but she actually started farming on a ridgetop in southwest Wisconsin. And she, after farming there for, I want to say it was 10, maybe 15 years, she moved to more central Wisconsin onto a lot better land. And she told me, she said, Chris, I always thought that I wasn't a very good farmer. And it actually turns out I'm a really good farmer. I just didn't have the land that I needed to be a really good farmer.
Well, and I would also say that I've seen a couple of people move their farms, and I've seen divorces over it. I would never want to do that. Right. Even though I'm just, thinking about it sometimes in my own place. Right. You don't want to do that. So my belief is you learn on someone else's dollar. Right. You learn from all these different people, and then you save, or you do everything you can, and you seek out opportunities and you network. And there are plenty of people. I'm an urban farmer in Southeast Kansas City. Even within 15 blocks of my place, there are 2 people that would hire a full-time farmer if they knew that the person they were hiring was worth it. Right. That's just within literally 10 blocks of where I live. There's a huge shortage and people to actually go out there and do this.
Greg, we're going to take a moment here and get a word from our sponsors. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is brought to you by Fertrell, a friend of nature since 1946. Fertrell has a full-service agronomy department that provides support to their nationwide network of customers, dealers, and distributors. And Fertrell is about far more than just any one type of crop. They work with commodity and forage crops, large-scale vegetable and fruit farms, and small-scale and backyard growers, as well as livestock producers. No matter your level of experience, Fertrell has the products and the knowledge to help you grow healthy, natural plants and animals. Their full line of soil amendments, dry blend and liquid fertilizers, and weed, pest, and disease control products for organic production means that they can help you to assemble a comprehensive system for organic farming. The Fertrell Company knows that healthy soils are the foundation for healthy crops, not just from a philosophical standpoint or for maximizing nutrition, but also because building healthy soils sets the stage for harvest efficiency, post-harvest quality, pest resistance, and succession planting. Fertrell. Better naturally. Fertrell.com. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is sponsored by Osborne Seed Company. Osborne Seed Company is focused on serving professional growers on any scale, from market gardens to commercial scale organic and conventional growers. With their active sourcing and trialing program, Osborne Seed is able to offer a wide range of products, giving growers a competitive edge with niche products, as well as a greater selection of varieties to meet the challenging and increasingly variable growing and marketing conditions faced by today's growers. I learned about Osborne Seed from one of the fussiest growers I know who recommended them to me as a source of high-quality seeds. One of the little telling details about Osborne's dedication to quality and their focus on market farmers is that they pack all of their seeds to order in resealable foil packets, which helps to maintain the quality of the seeds over time. When you grow crops for market in successions throughout the season, you need quality seeds the first time you plant them and the last, and little details like this make a huge difference. Osborne Seed Company, high quality seed and superior customer service. New and existing customers get $5 off the first order of $50 or more when you mention the Farmer to Farmer podcast. OsborneSeed.com. Now back to our interview with Greg Garbos.
And the more people you intern for, the more farms that you go to. And I love the idea of, if you're a young person and you have a partner, is partners going together, right? And going through those stressful farming environments and all that different stuff when it's not your farm and your life depends on it. And then you do everything that you can to just, leverage your moment, right? And then the doors will just start opening for you, right? And don't be afraid to say no to those first couple doors because they might seem so great, but they're not perfect. The perfect things are all right around the corner. So people who really want to get into the space and are willing and able to do the work, the sky is the limit. I've seen, Colin Thompson's a great example. He used to work for Four Seasons Tools, and now he's running the Upper Peninsula Michigan State the student organic vegetable farm, right? And the guy's amazing, and he was able to do that by learning from other people, and the doors just opened. And now he's got one of the coolest. He works really hard. He's a really smart guy, but he's now got one of the coolest jobs, of anybody that I know that's taken a farm manager job, and it's out there. It's out there. It's absolutely out there. But so if I can continue to go on the design, just put a couple other things that I think, talking about. So scale and scalability, we talked about the $135,000. The other thing I'm going to say is you want to design your farms, do twice that. So $135,000 is what, to me is the minimum kind of, farming operation that makes sense. You want to make sure when you actually build out your infrastructure or whatever, that you're basically building it out at a factor of at least 2, if not 3x, right? Meaning that, hey, I'm about to put in a walk-in cooler. The incremental cost of a walk-in cooler that's, let's say, 500 square feet versus 750 square feet is not a lot of cost, right? But then what it can do for your operation and the ability to scale and ramp up into that. The worst thing you want to do is build this beautiful farm, right? Get to a place where suddenly, you built it not big enough, right? So, I think it's important that when you design it, that you also say, well, I'd be happy with 135,000 or whatever your number happens to be. But then you want to make sure that you build the infrastructure so that it is, could be more. So perfect example, on my farm, we just put in new electrical service to our greenhouse, and the choice was between 100 amp and 200 amp. Now, our utility pays for the main line from the pole. The difference in cost to me was $115. So I don't need 200 amps, but for $115, I sure as crap want them to put it in,
So, Greg, I see where that makes sense with things like running an electrical line or maybe running a water line where the cost of doing it over is going to be really high, and where the actual dollar outlay to put in, say, 2-inch line, 2-inch water line versus 1-inch water line is really not significantly that much more. You're not talking thousands of dollars, you're talking hundreds of dollars.
If you run a trench, also run your telecommunication, your wire, your security lines, your phone lines, your coax, your Ethernet. Like the cost of digging the trench, not the wire.
Fundamental principle here. Listen, if you don't already know this and you're listening to this podcast, this will be worth every episode that you've listened to so far. This one hint is that if you open a trench, you lay everything you possibly can in that trench. Even if you lay the Ethernet line, lay the whatever it is, put it all down in there, because you just never know what it is that you're going to want. And it's way cheaper to get it in the first time. And besides which, then you don't have to dig another trench and risk hitting things with it. But Greg, so it's easy to talk about this when we're talking about, a couple $100 a phone line or something, or a, electrical wire. But what about when you say engineer for 2 or 3 times as large, when we're talking about something like a packing shed or a walk-in cooler, where we're not talking hundreds of dollars, we're talking tens of thousands or even potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars more to build a pack house that's going to work for now we're talking a $400,000 farm rather than for a $135,000 farm?
Yeah, I think that in general, just always err on the side of bigger, right? And because what's going to happen in farming is there's just going to be those moments, right? It's just that moment where there's a huge event, and now my coolers have in them, deli platters for this event, and now there's no room for the arugula, right? So when you plan it, there's always going to be things that you can't plan. I heard this guy named Chris Blanchard speak one time and talked about how your plan only lasts until your first encounter with the enemy. Am I subquoting you even remotely close?
Right. It was a general in the Franco-Prussian War who said that, but I was just quoting.
But I think that I think about it a lot because I heard you say that, right? And I think that's entertaining to me because it's absolutely true. So I would just, and then I think find the sweet spots, right? The reality is the first single square foot of a cooler is 50% of your cost, right? And then as you get bigger, it's the rest of it. So I think finding those sweet spots. So like for me, when I did my radiant heating system, right, there was this really crazy jump between, dollars spent on a BTU heater versus gallons of the heater, whatever. I got really, was into it in that moment. And it made me realize that if I went to commercial level, right? So yeah, I had to spend $1,800 as opposed to like $800, right? But then that would have a return on investment of 5 years because the efficiency that I would gain, and I was able to actually do it. And at the time, I was looking at 2 heaters versus 1. I was able to do it all within 1 heater, right? So, there's things to be looking at as far as redundancy. If one thing fails, what happens, right? So we talk about like twice the cooler space that you need. It's better to have that be 2 different coolers than 1 cooler, right? And, CoolBots are amazing. Ron Kosa is one of the smartest guys that I know in this field. And, if anybody look at, cold storage units, you build your own walk-in and use a window air conditioning unit with this thing called a CoolBot that allows you to kind of override the thermostat of the air conditioner and do a walk-in cooler, right? So I think his website is storeitcold.com. He's the same guy behind Certified Naturally Grown, and he's the same guy behind the LSG electric tractor conversions. Very, very smart fellow. And when we did our radiant, I designed my radiant heating system with him. And when we started talking about some of these things and looking at some of this stuff, it became really, really apparent that, more is better, especially when it comes to like the livelihood of my plants. So there's situations that don't really matter, right? Like, hey, does it really matter if this concrete pad is this versus that? So how do you size your beds? A lot of people size their beds and their spacing around buildings about where they can drive a tractor around it or where they can pull a car with a trailer. It's going back to the labor, right? If there's a moment where you can spend twice as much and save 10% labor, you do it. You just do it because it's a one-time investment that'll do it. So for me, it has so much to do with labor savings, redundancy, right? If you have 1 cooler going out, the fact that you still have another one, right? So you're not screwed, you spend the money on your own, I'll call it intellectual insurance. So I have in my coolers and in my greenhouses, I have a temperature alarm system. I happen to use the one from Lacrosse Technologies. It's a Lacrosse Alerts branded product. And they're, it's $100, $150 to buy the kind of base setup. You have a little device that you plug into your Ethernet, your router, and then it all kind of, your sensors have to be within a certain distance of that thing. So there's, it's a limited thing, but for $100, I get text alarms and email alarms if anything goes out. So I have them in my coolers, especially on the nights before delivery when I've got thousands of dollars in there. I've got them in the greenhouses. I got them in the germination chambers. I can test my radiant heating system, water, but these alarming systems. So I think part of these investments too is the fact that you spend the money to protect your investments, right? So yeah, when, $300 is not a lot of money, right? But I have, at any given moment, I got right now like $22,000 of product in my greenhouse of, current and potential product, and so it would be really dumb to not buy a $3,000 heater and then have my first heater go out and not have a backup and not be able to and lose it all. That's the kind of thing that would, take years to recover from. So I think it's also about making the investments that, kind of the oh no kind of investments or I'm just searching for a term here, but
I almost want to say it's a preventative maintenance thing. It's no different than changing the oil in your tractor before you have a problem with the oil in your tractor. It really is just saying it's a monitoring tool. And that's such a key function on the farm is paying attention to what's going on. And this is just another way of paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. So having that right stuff, having it at that, at the scale that does make sense for your operation, thinking about redundancy, and just always thinking, what happens if something failed? I have a vegetable spinner, a greens machine that we use to spin all of the water off of our greens after we wash them because it improves their shelf life. And if that were to go out, in the middle of the day, you have a delivery day, we'd be crippled, right? So we have another one sitting on deck, and it's a $2,400 machine new. I mean, I buy them used for $500, $600, but I have that there. Our harvesters, we use these little grass trimmers from Black & Decker and mechanically harvest a lot of our stuff, and we try to never use scissors because of labor efficiency, and it's such a key tool for us. We have 2 of them brand new sitting in a box, right? And if one of those boxes get opened, I get notified and we replace that box because it's that important to what it is that we do. We have to have that stability even when things don't go right. So another design thing, right, that I talk about is I guess we're kind of switching into implementation, but is buying into platforms. Right. So if you're going to go and say IFCO crates, collapsible crates are going to be the way we're going to move produce around and do our material handling. When you go to buy IFCO crates, you don't buy 10 of them. You buy 110 of them. Right. And when you find these platforms that work that you want to do, you buy a lot of them because they all stack nice. They can nestle nice. Right. You've bought into a standardized platform. Now you can make sure that as you're designing benches and stuff, that the benches are tall enough and wide enough to fit this crate. When you do the mini pallets, your mini pallets are sized for the bottom of the crate. When you buy a Lacrosse Alerts alarm system, you don't spend $100, you spend the $300, and you get all 5 of these different alarms. And I think that buying into platforms at bulk, when we're talking about market farming, makes a tremendous amount of sense. The analogy I use in my personal life is when I go to buy socks, I go to Costco and I buy 3 huge bags of socks. Right, I'll buy like 100 pairs of socks at once,
and they're all the same, right? So that you don't, when you get done doing the laundry, you don't have to spend any time matching the socks. You just put them all in the drawer.
So I think that kind of purchasing, when it comes to key items on the farm, it's really funny when you watch somebody, who's typically used to harvesting with a certain pair of scissors, and then they can't find them, and they grab a different pair of scissors, and you watch that person just stumble through that moment. And they're a very competent person. There's nothing against them, right? But you're disrupting their muscle memory, right? And one of the amazing things about farming is when you farm to the point of excellence, your muscles are kicking in. Why is it that guys, that are the fastest math computers in the world are those little kids from Asia who can can do it with abacuses, right? Because once they're so good at it, they don't even use the abacus anymore, and you'll just see them sitting there doing complex math stuff, like twiddling their fingers, because our human muscle memory is far faster and innate than our ability to think about it. That's why skateboarders can do triple crazy flip ollie things, and mixed martial arts players can have someone turn just a hint of a direction, and then they can flip them over, or a linebacker being able to go this direction versus that direction, in that key moment. That's your body being faster than your brain, right? And muscle memory is a really important part of efficiency, and that's where people do it. So I'll tell a story that I really like. I was working in the automotive industry at the Atlanta assembly plant building Ford Tauruses. It was a wonderful job. But there's this guy that I met, and he was training a new guy, and every job has to be done in 54 seconds. The line time is 54 seconds. So literally your job happens 54 seconds. You stay put, the cars move through the plant, right? So he was training this guy, and he told me the story about how, the first day he's there, he's got to go 3 cars up, get in that guy's way, do his little job or whatever. So the time it gets to us, he's halfway done, and then he's got to disrupt the next 3 guys in the line because he's not done his stuff. And he's like, oh, this is hard. And then 3 weeks later, he's only disrupting the guy in front of him, behind him, and then a month after that, he finally could do it in 54 seconds. So he turns and he's just like, hey, Bobby, do I got it? And he's like, no, you don't got it. He's like, oh, okay. Right. So then, a little bit later, he's doing it in 44 seconds. He's like, Bobby, do I got it? And Bobby's like, no, you don't got it. Right. A month goes by later, he goes up 3 lines ahead of him, gets the next 3 cars done, goes to the bathroom, right, comes back, gets on the line, doesn't miss a beat. And he turns and Bobby goes, yeah, you got it. And I think that's just like such a funny story for me, because I've seen that in my farm. Like when we doubled the size of the farm, our farmers had never seen an operation like ours operate at that scale. I had, and I designed it, and I've been designing these things, but they had never seen it. And then it was a really, really rough 4 months, right? Where suddenly you're now responsible for twice as much stuff as what they felt. But it didn't take long before we were able to grow twice as many microgreens with only about a 15 to 25% increase in our time. And a lot of that had to do with this muscle memory. These guys were getting in the groove. And now instead of sowing 40 trays, you're sowing, 140 trays. And how much faster you can do 140 trays versus 40 trays, right? And I think that when we have these systems, we have to allow ourselves to fall into our chores, right? And I think that once you do that, and once the muscle memory's there, and you're doing all those wonderful things, efficiency and the speed kind of comes in. Well, I just think that that's something we're getting. It's really tough in farming. Is that it's also a very high turnover industry. It's a very easy entry industry with high turnover. So you have a lot of people who typically aren't staying at farms for very long. And as a person who wants to be a farm owner, not a farm operator, that is a very difficult part of our industry. And it goes back to the design and implementation. Do you want skilled labor or unskilled labor, and how can you systemize your things to accommodate for both?
I think that's actually, we say that it's something it's not inherent in the industry. If you go out to California, the people that are harvesting vegetables in California are professionals. That's what they do. And I remember reading an article a few years ago that really made an impression on me. This guy was talking about harvesting iceberg lettuce and how the crew that they had out there, that's what they were picking was iceberg lettuce. And they didn't pick 5 kinds of lettuce. They picked iceberg. They did that. They were talking about how long does it take to get really good at picking iceberg lettuce. And one of the guys on the crew said, it takes 3 years to get good at picking iceberg lettuce. And that's the kind of thing that you're talking about here with this hitting your stride, really feeling like that muscle memory. It's where you're not thinking about it at all. And you're just doing your hands and your body do the things that it needs to do without any real intention on your part. And I think it's something that we really underestimate when we design systems that are essentially designed to facilitate turnover. We design farm systems that have low paying jobs, low wage, so that people can't afford to stay. We set up seasonal operations that don't have any potential for year-round employment. We're not storing. We're not using the advantage of the greenhouses in the north. So we end up with this situation where people. It's not that we have high turnover. It's that we've created a system where there isn't any option other than high turnover. I think we need to think about how do we get that? How do we get those people to come and stay?
Yeah, so I take a slightly different approach, right? We have a year-round operation, right? And we try to pay our skilled labor really well. I think I have something like 33 or 50% of the year-round salaried farming positions in Kansas City in sustainable agriculture. There's very, very few. And I have 2 full-time employees, right? So, right. But we pay them, I believe I pay them a fair, above market, wage for what they do. So we have a limited number of people, and then we try to invest in them to do it. But I'm hiring right now. We always have problems, with staffing, right? And I think that you're exactly right about the characteristics that go in there. So when you talk about farm design, I personally, and I'm a season extension greenhouse guy, right? Is I don't understand farms that aren't year round. I understand people need a break and all this stuff. I get that, but to have a summer CSA but then not have a winter CSA, what other industries do you basically design your operations that at one point at the end of the year you wave goodbye to your clients and you say, hey, I hope to see you guys in the spring. That makes no sense to me at all. When we talk about this infrastructure, when you buy a walk-in cooler, you own that walk-in cooler 365. You don't own that walk-in cooler, just for, one period of time or another. It just costs you that money. So I'm a huge believer in year-round farming. And then your seasonal labor, in theory, right, could be your kind of hiring pool to make sure that your year-round positions, are full. But, again, my business model is pretty specific because, we're in the specialty industry where I need skilled people. I have 2 people and they're putting, $10,000 out a month by themselves. When you talk about scale and all this stuff, when we do our deliveries, we do it in 3 whale coolers, right? And we literally deliver $1,000 twice a week, and we do it in 3 whale coolers, right? So we're not pulling, pallets of, potatoes out of the ground or anything like that. And I think that is really important, is this year-round aspect to the farming operation, because it's really hard to do a seasonal business, because if you're, in a 9-month season, you have to do 33% more during those 9 months to pay for that winter than you would have if you were a year-round farm.
And I think recognizing that there's a lot of different options and opportunities for that. I know that lately the 4-season production has been a big one, but I know a lot of farms that back in the 90s were able to shift into 4-season availability of product and 4-season employment for their labor by going to storage crops. That there's other ways to crack that nut than just being than being an Elliott Coleman 4-season farm or being a Greg Garbos 4-season microgreens operation. I think there's a lot of creative approaches that can be taken to creating something that really does have year-round potential. And I think ultimately it's something we're going to need in the local foods market, because as long as we're willing to back out for the winter time, like you said, we lose our customers. Yep, we had this product yesterday and we don't have it again today. And we hope you're going to come back in 6 months. But that's just not, I don't know, that doesn't feel like you just said, it's a business model. The only other business I can think of where that works is professional sports.
Well, or, I'm from New Hampshire, so ski mountains, or kayak rentals, or, things that are seasonal heavy. But those businesses, the margin on those businesses is not aligned with the margin in our industry.
Well, and let's also think about the fact that what has happened, you take the ski industry recently, when I spent a couple years in Aspen, Colorado back in the late 80s, and back then the ski industry was just beginning to expand outside of its normal season. But now those chairlifts, they're in service all year round. They're running mountain bikers up to the top of the mountain and let them bike down. I mean, my partner's daughter just got a job at a ski place up near St. Croix Falls, except her job is for the summer water park. So they're using, there's a way in which they're not necessarily using the mountain in the summertime, but they're using the labor pool, the management resources, all of those other things they're being used year round, even if it's not exactly each resource that's being used year round, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, the reason they're doing it is they're trying to make the math work.
So, Greg, we've spent a lot of time talking about kind of designing your system for your farm. Let's switch over and talk for a minute about this implementation phase.
Yeah, so I think that we've definitely talked about different philosophies on what kind of farms can look like, right? When it comes to implementation, I think that there's a big thing there about prioritization, right? And one of the best ways a farm can do that is just bring one thing through the farm, right? What it takes to have a single lead of lettuce, harvest it out of the ground, wash it, pack it, weigh it, label it, invoice for it, receive that invoice for it, have a price sheet for it, et cetera, et cetera. What it actually takes just to do a single head of lettuce is a lot, right? The difference between a single head of lettuce versus 1,000 heads of lettuce is not as significant as going from 0 heads of lettuce to 1 head of lettuce, right? And I would suggest that when you think about implementation, to really think about it in that way. Think about operationally how these different items will be going through the operation, and be thinking about what sort of things make sense there, right? So for me, if you're talking about a year-round farm, one of the first construction things that's going to happen is the ability to actually do something with produce once you have it. Right. So that's to make sure there's a sink, refrigeration, et cetera, right? Then there's the kind of office stuff. And again, that's the price sheets, the marketing literature, the whatever. And then when it comes to the kind of construction phase, I think that water is just way up front. It's just way up front. In fact, we have a rule that when we build farms, or even in our garden at our place, you are not allowed to plant plants until the irrigation system is in place. You're not allowed to do it. And if you Greg,
hold on. Say that one more time really slowly, because I think this is something that a lot of people miss.
If you make the decision on your farm to have a rule that nothing is allowed to get planted until the irrigation system for that is in place, you have a better chance of succeeding at that farm. because water is the lifeblood of all this. You can't control when there's sunlight or not, but you have to have water. You have to have water before you plant. So when you're thinking about your infrastructure development on a farm, your frost-free hydrants and your trenches, these are very, very important things that you need to have in place pretty much right away. And when you do that, you need to know where you're going to need water. So through your design phase, you've come up with, your master plan, potentially done in phases, right? And then once you have that, you say, well, I know that I need to have a frost-free hydrant in the greenhouse, and I need to have one in the corner of every planting bed, and I need to have one anywhere where I would wash and pack, and I need to have one near my orchards or animals, right? And you put that in. And to your point, when you trench, you put all that stuff in, right? Same rule of thumb is whenever you pour concrete, put your PEX lines in for future radiant heating if you ever wanted to. We were talking about that earlier before the call, right? But there are these things that you do that are involved with infrastructure. So you basically, once you know your layout, you put your water and your utilities in, all of your services, whether it's propane tanks or natural gas or all that stuff. I think that I made a huge mistake in not doing that. And I knew better. Right, but I didn't have the budget at the time. I could afford the greenhouse, but I couldn't afford everything else. And the reality is I shouldn't have built a greenhouse first. I should have gotten the water in place first. Right. I mean, I even had my greenhouse up before I put a 1,600-gallon cistern in the greenhouse. And trying to figure out how to get a 1,600-gallon cistern through the hoops of a greenhouse that was already constructed was not my proudest moment as a farm engineer. But I think that infrastructure stuff is critically important, kind of early on in that stage. Then going back to a point I said earlier, and this is another just rule of farm construction, in my opinion, is that you got to build the farm before you farm. Right. It's so annoying. I've done it in my own farm over and over and over again. When I need to do something stupid with construction in my greenhouse that I should have done before, and now I'm moving 48 trays out of the way to do it. And it's disrupting the operation. It's disrupting the rhythm, the muscle memory, all this kind of stuff that we're talking about. Right. It's bucking the trends of how things are going. So you really do want to do everything you can to try to finish that project. And Chris, I'm sure it's available on your website, but your time management presentation on Moses this year was really, really fantastic. I mean, the whole farm staff listened to it, my whole office staff. We now have all of our index card Amish PDAs, and are taking, that stuff really, really seriously. So I think that this infrastructure is commonly overlooked, but the infrastructure goes all the way through the watering, the irrigation, the greenhouses and the season extension, the harvesting, the material transport from the harvest to the wash pack, the washing and packing, transport to the refrigeration, from the refrigeration transplant to the delivery system, right? Thinking that all out, and literally all the way through the invoice to the receipt of the invoice, right? Just get all of that in place up front. You can always make it better later, but if there's no mechanism in place, then you can really find yourself in a difficult situation. I remember it being very, very difficult to sell my first $5 of microgreens. I've been growing microgreens for 9 months. Right. And I couldn't get anybody to give me $1. Couldn't get anybody to give me $1, right? And it was so frustrating. I would have buddies come over and I would be like, dude, here's $1 million of microgreens. Just give me $5 for this so I could finally say that I'm a market farmer. And they would laugh at me because I was so emphatic about it, they didn't realize that I was being serious, And it wasn't until we landed this one restaurant account. But I realized quickly that one of the reasons I didn't do that is I didn't have a mechanism in place for the point of sale. There was no price sheets. There was no invoices. There was no way to bill anybody anything. I was missing completely the fact that there has to be a commerce point of sale solution for me to sell this stuff. And it took me months. And then, then we landed our first restaurant account, right? That was, we're going to buy from us twice a week, every week. And then we had to scramble to put together our, invoices and price sheets and how are we going to do deliveries and what form goes with the stuff that goes and does the deliveries, right? So I think that, that is something. I have another rule on my farm that nothing gets planted unless we know where it's going to get sold. Now, our garden is different. We do a lot of experimentation in our garden, but within our greenhouse, we don't plant it unless we know it's going to be sold. So we do a grow to order concept, which is, it was very, very hard to get off the ground. And part of the reason it took me 9 months to sell stuff is I didn't have something to sell. I was trying to basically say, I will grow you whatever you want, chef. And it took a long time to get that going, but now that it exists, it's awesome. It was such a good decision back then, even though it hurt a lot in those early stages, is that we are actually, growing to order and how we implement this stuff. So deciding this business model When it comes to the implementation of this stuff, I think the business models that are designed around growing to order, controlling the clients, right, controlling the retail point, controlling the point of sale, controlling the distribution point, all based on your terms. We're at a point in our industry where we can all do that. Everybody, I think farmers in general, really, really incredibly nice people, but they try too hard for people. And what I think you need to do is you need to instead say, this is a model and a situation that works really, really well for me, and then throw it out there. And it might not be right away, where people are buying into that, but it won't be long before, people are going to accept you and how, what it is you have to offer, the way that you have to offer it, and you will have a successful business, because from the beginning you designed it in such a way where it could actually work for you.
I think it's a really important idea, and I really like this idea of what demand based. That you've got the idea here that the way you're doing it with the microgreens, you're selling them ahead of time. You're growing to order. I think it doesn't necessarily even have to happen within this traditional CSA model, but I really do like that idea that you it's not just knowing where you're going to sell it, but it's knowing that it's sold.
And I think that conceptually, I don't want to mislead people, right? It's not actually sold, like I've just created a model where I, have stuff for my clients, right? So every Tuesday, every Friday, we harvest a bunch of stuff, but 4 to 6 weeks ago, 2 to 6 weeks ago, we did plant based on what we think we were about to sell, right? So I don't want you to think that like a restaurant comes to me and says, I need arugula in 2 weeks. It doesn't work like that. They say, I need arugula today, but we've established a relationship with them where we now know how much arugula they want on a weekly basis. And it's going to fluctuate up or down or whatever. So I think that I'm not trying to say that we actually do specifically grow to order, but our farming mentality and the design of our farm is designed around that concept.
I mean, I remember when I worked at Harmony Valley Farm back in 1993, we knew that every week we were going to sell 12 3-pound cases of salad mix to L'Etoile restaurant, right? That was a basis that we could build everything else out on. But we knew that we had a market for that, and they were committed, and they were every week. That's what they were taking. So it was easy to predict. So, Greg, let's take a few moments and talk about in your farm design, this operations portion.
Well, yeah, I think that is, critically important. I think good people, staffing, and personnel is the hardest part of any small scale business operation. If I was Bill Gates and I wanted to fund, something la land, I'd throw a bunch of money at, farmer training and professional hiring services for farmers or something. I mean, it's that critically important, and it's really, really not. It's really, really messed up. There's amazing programs out there, like, was it UC Santa Cruz or Michigan State that has these either certificate programs or horticulture degree programs. But you even get great kids out of that, try to throw them in a farming environment, they're going to flounder, right? Because it's such a results driven business. So we've had a lot of luck pulling from restaurants because the workflow and the intensity of the work is very, very similar. They're both very low. It's very easy to get into both businesses, right? Even without degrees or even a resume for most sometimes, right? You can get into both businesses, and they're both very, very intense and very, very results deliverable oriented, right? So that is, definitely a way to find potentially a talent pool. Is there's a lot of chefs that care about food. They bring a lot of value to you because they bring this culinary expertise. They're used to really, really long days and hot kitchens, and the fact that you're not allowed to leave until the job's done, right? So I think there is something to that. But I think staff is the hardest thing, and I wish I was better at it because it's definitely the most difficult part of my operation, And then I think that something you and I have talked a lot about when it comes to operation is really intentional decision making. And the way that I talk about this on my farm is I'll say, hey, you're about to put a tag into a tray. Every time you're about to do something, it's a decision. Every decision you make is an opportunity. So if you put the tag in the center of the tray, that can mean one thing. You put the tag in the front right of the tray, that can mean something else. You lay it flat on the tray, that can mean something totally different, right? So even this dumb thing like putting a tag in a tray, you suddenly create this amazing opportunity. And if you standardize how that happens for everybody, right, then you have the ability to do that. So we've been talking about the fact that, we update price sheets very, very frequently because we want chefs to feel like the price of our stuff does go up and down with the market. When ORAC seed goes from $30 a pound to $90 a pound, I want to be able to charge more for ORAC, right? So we send out price sheet updates frequently. I mean, most people do once a year or something, which I don't agree with. You should send them out frequently, right? And then we've said, well, why don't we, when we do a price change update, we'll send them out on a fluorescent green price sheet, right? Because they get a price sheet, every time we deliver, they're getting a price sheet. So why don't we, differentiate that in some way, right? And the decision there is, do you put white paper or green paper into the copier? But every decision that you make is an opportunity to make an operational decision. So I think that's important. I think that then incremental and continuous improvement. The personality type that doesn't work on my farm is someone who comes in and takes any sort of feedback as negative feedback, right? I can't say that I've never in my life made a farm employee cry, right? But it's really, really hard for me as a business owner to say, hey, next time you do that, I need you to do it this way, than for someone to cry, right? Because if we can't be in a situation where we're trying to get incrementally better every moment, right, then I don't know how else to do that, because our farming situations are really, really intense. So I think how you train people is really, really important. And this goes back to the productivity and muscle memory, is that if you've never seen a 1,500 square foot greenhouse put out $15,000 of microgreens, you probably can't relate to what that looks like. If you want to come to my place, we'll show you, right? But what I think is interesting about that is that people that do it actually do get it. And it takes them months, like you're saying, 3 years to harvest lettuce to get it. But once they're there, they're there. So we have to figure out a way to document that. So in your time management thing, you talked about, plan do lists, and operating procedures actually being more of the directives. And I love the idea, and something we're implementing on our farm for your presentation is a farm map, where if something needs to be done in the garden, we just have these standard forms that are sitting on the shelf. We grab it off, big marker, we just circle plant bed number 8, and then write on it what it is that they need to do, these directives or operating procedures. But the thing that I think is also really important is to show production. Right. And that's really, really hard. So one of the things that we're doing on the farm right now is actually taking these YouTube videos, right? It says, hey, we're about to fill 100 trays, right? We've calculated how many trays we need of all these different things. We have our sewing sheet. We've prepared our station, and this is the method that we do. And then you take a video of someone cranking through it. And then you set a benchmark. We say, look, we know that we can fill, 100 trays in 35 minutes. Right. And even though the first person coming in on the first day can't do that, I know that I can do it. I know that my staff can do it. Right. But if someone has no concept of what that is, they don't know how badly they're performing if they don't know what a good performance looks like. Right. So what we're trying to do is actually take the key operations of our farm, the washing, the sowing, the harvesting, and actually making these, operational internal how-to videos that show how we do these different things, but show it in an informative way, but then also show it at a full production speed. So someone comes to the farm, maybe there's a volunteer, somebody, and there's hey, go ahead and fill 100 trays, right? What you do is you forward them the YouTube link, and you say, watch this link, come back and find me in 15 minutes and ask me any questions, right? So before you've even started a conversation with the person, before you even started training them, you've already shown them a video on how it is that they can do it. But far more importantly, you've also shown them, you've defined success, you've defined production, you've shown them what things look like on an actual production scale. The best example I can give of this is Jack Algier at the Stone Barn Center, definitely one of the best farmers in the country, right? And we were out there doing some tool development stuff with Elliot and Adam Lemieux from Johnny's and folks and stuff like that. And he was talking about a broad fork, and he was in his greenhouse. And he was talking about how you use a broad fork, and he was showing it and talking about the fact that you push it in and you pull it back and then you drag it, you don't lift it, and these different things. And I said, Jack, can you show me how you do that at full speed? And he's just like, you want me to work? I'm like, no, Jack, please, right? And he's a great guy, and of course he did. And it changed my opinion completely of broad forking. I'd never in my life, even though I've been selling the tool for years, really seen someone do it at a production speed. And I went home, and 2 weeks later, I broad forked the garden, and I did it in half the time that I used to do it. I was just doing it wrong. I didn't know what success looked like. So I think when we train people, that's important. And I think when we train people, you don't train them on how you do it now. You train them on how you want your best practice to be. So say you have an employee leaving, and they're training the new employee. If they train that new employee on where you're at, that new employee isn't going to be able to perform like your old employee. They just can't, right? It's going to take them some time. But if my new employee trains them on best practices, meaning, man, I really wish that we did it this way, so I'm going to teach you as if the way that I wish we would do it, right? When that person comes in, they're still not going to be able to meet that. But in theory, hopefully they've come a lot closer, or maybe even they've exceeded it, but you've at least set the standard. So I think one of the best things in a small company is when people do enter and leave. It's very, very tumultuous, but it's also a tremendous opportunity for you to literally redo what it is that you do. A small business, everybody wears hats. So you have a new person that comes in and they happen to have a graphic design background. You try to figure out how to fit them into that operation. But then as those roles and responsibilities shift around the team, it's also an opportunity to literally, hit a reset button every time someone enters and leaves an operation to then work yourself closer to the way it is that you actually want to be, not where you're at.
Greg, this is great. I think I love those some really practical tips about how to implement good design in your farm. Thank you so much.
Let me give you an example, like record keeping. You were joking around about an app for record keeping, right? And people, what do you say? The reason people have a record keeping app is they don't want to do record keeping.
Exactly.
For me, I think about it differently. I think about it in the context of, record keeping has to be built into the system. It can't be an afterthought. So going back to benchmark. So in our greenhouse operation, we have a benchmark for 3 minutes per tray to harvest, right? So in 3 minutes, you have to take a tray from wherever it is in the greenhouse. You have to harvest it. You have to pack it into a bag, get it into the refrigerator, compost that tray. You have to record the yield of that tray and the date of that tray that was sown. So we talk about benchmarks. How we actually pull off 3 minutes a tray is that it's built into our system. We have a tray that we put down on the ground, like a little stool, like a large step stool that's right at kind of the height of our knees. And then we put our scale on top of that. And then we put our harvest bin on top of that. And then we tar out our scale. So we have a scale that can handle the capacity of a bin and the product. And then you stand over it with these grass trimmers. As you're trimming these trays and the product is falling in, you're weighing it as you go. So, hey, I need to do 25 trays of arugula. The reality is those are all probably from the same date, right? So I'm going up there. So I know my date. I harvest all 22 into the bin, right? Or 1 or 2 bins, however it takes. And then all I have to do is look down before I pick up the bin, and I got my weight, and I just got to write down the weight and a plant tag. Right. And then I try to capture that data in the most meaningful way possible. We've been doing it by hand recording it, and we're now switching over to Google Docs so that even if we don't deal with our data right now, we're at least capturing our data in electronic form. But that's very, very simple information. But what it allows me to do as a grower is to, hey, it's May, and someone will come and say, hey, on July 15th, I need 20 pounds of arugula for a wedding. But what I do is I then bring out the binder from last year and I look at the July 15th harvest date, and then I go backwards and I try to figure out where the sow date was for it. So if I say, oh, this was 2 weeks before July 15th, I need to do this on July 1st. What I actually do, right, is I'll plant a third of what I need, or maybe 40% of what I need, at the end of June, 40% on July 1st, and then 40% on like July 4th, right? And that way I'm kind of covering my bases. But if I didn't have that data, it'd be really important. So I also think that data is really, really important early on and becomes a lot less important as you go. And as your operation gets bigger and bigger and bigger, sometimes it's harder and harder to collect that data effectively. So I think that first year is really, really important. So when you start, it's like economics for a second. When you start a farm, you put together a business plan, and it's all just guesses. I love talking about farm economics. I do a great farm economics presentation, right? That, I try to teach farm economics without talking about math, because the second you talk about math, you lose everybody, right? But you need to come up with a plan. And I think that where people are getting it wrong is they don't take educated guesses. You might not know what your monthly electricity bill is, in your greenhouse, but take a guess, right? You're not going to be that far off. You're not going to be off by an order of magnitude. And over time, you can refine it. So you start with some sort of a financial plan. And I would hope that you've been at other farms and have mentors or people, or hired someone like you to help them kind of figure out that plan, so you're not starting from a point of naivety, I guess. Then when you go to your implementation, you then do the stuff, in Iowa State, I guess, calls them the crop enterprise budgets. Right? I learned it from John Bieringbaum and Adam Montre at Michigan State in the context of dollar per square foot weeks, right? But that you do actually then really, really run your numbers. So an example of my greenhouse is that every tray is 1.57 square feet. It's a 10-20 tray. A 10-20 tray actually takes up 10 3/4 inches by 21 inches. And although it doesn't seem like a big deal, it's a really freaking big deal if you're designing your greenhouse around a 10 by 20 tray that's actually 21 inches long. So all of our benches are 63 inches, for example. So when I learned dollar per square foot weeks from Adam and John, right? I then applied that to my farm, and I did basically a crop enterprise budget for every one of my crops. And I'm trying to teach my farm staff and then this dollar per square foot stuff. And I was just losing everybody. And I love math, and I guess they don't love math as much as I do, right? And it was just a tough translation. But then when I switched it, and I started talking about it per tray. I just multiplied out the 1.57 square feet to get it to trays. And I said, look, and then I figured it out. Here's my packaging cost per tray, my soil cost per tray, my seed cost per tray, my heating cost per tray, my, payroll cost per tray. Every cost I could figure out on a per tray basis, I figured all that stuff out. And then all of a sudden the lights started going off for the staff, because now we were talking about a module they could relate to. So if you were a gardener, for example, it might be a 100-foot bed, right? And now that's your module, right? So now you need to have your benchmarks per module. For me, it's a tray. For you, it can be 100-foot of beds, right? But then you really do give a go at it, right? So I built a simple, Excel model with nothing more complicated than plus, minus, times, and divide, where I can put in the number of trays that I harvested and how many hours it took me to harvest, and it kind of spits out a profitable or not. And I ran it both from, what's my profit per crop based on my current yields, and then what yields would I need to do at my current price point to hit my financial metrics. And through that whole process, I just came up with a number. I realized that my target number is roughly, somewhere in the ballpark of a couple dollars per square foot. I need to generate a couple dollars per square foot of revenue on on the benches in my greenhouse. If I don't hit that number, I don't plant it. Elliot's got the same number, his own little benchmark number. If you can't hit a certain thing in a linear, 30-inch wide bed for linear feet, he doesn't do it. So you kind of find your number, your target number. Once you have your target number for per square foot, then it's really, really easy, because you can then say, well, originally it took 4 weeks. Did I hit my target number based on my yield and my price, right? And then you can look at it. So I did this whole analysis, and luckily for me, I had some good teachers. Out of the 32 crops that I did, 27 of them I didn't change the price on. But red vein sorrel, I was getting slaughtered, and I dropped it the next day. I was losing money growing red vein sorrel, and I immediately dropped it. Even Chefs for Matt, doesn't matter. I can't lose money as a farmer. Dropped it. Cold turkey. Goodbye, red vein sorrel. I've since figured out how to do it, but back then, goodbye, red vein sorrel, right? And then the other thing is just I realized, wow, golden popcorn shoots, this is a moneymaker for me, right? So I went ahead and actually dropped that price a little bit, right? And then on some of the other stuff, I raised the prices up for it to do it. And I was able to create a simple thing that said, what's my economics for, both directions, meaning what yield do I need at this price point, and based on the yield that I'm getting now, what does my price point have to be? So we're talking about crop enterprise budgets, right? And I did that very, very intensively for about 3 months. I really deep dived and looked at my numbers for about 3 months. And that really kind of taught me how to price my stuff, what success looked like as far as yield per tray, et cetera, et cetera. And to be honest, I haven't really done that very much since. About every maybe 3 to 4 months, I'll sit down for half an hour and I'll rerun a harvest through the model. But I don't do that a lot anymore, because now that I'm operating, it all happens through the chart of accounts on my accounting software. So we're very, very intelligent about our chart of accounts. We have a lot of accounts, a lot more than our accountant wants us to have. But we want to be able to think about the difference between labor for cleaning versus labor for harvesting versus labor for meetings. We want to differentiate the input costs of our soil versus other inputs amendments. We want to think about pest and disease control differently than rodent control, right? And then basically every quarter or once a year or however frequency you do it, you now can basically be checking all of your math versus your chart of accounts. So as you walk through this process, you start with a plan. You just take educated guesses where you don't know. You rely on intelligent people. If you're going to do a 6-figure farming operation, I would absolutely recommend hiring a consultant like me or Chris Blanchard or Jean-Martin Fortier up in Canada or Michael Kilpatrick, somebody like that, to help you come in and design the farm. Once you're up and going, and then you got to pick your module, a way to look at your math. And in my, again, it's a tray versus a 10-foot versus a 100-foot bed. And then you look at some analysis, and I call that modular-based mathematics, right? You pick your module, and then you define a way to easily look at that. And that's really about figuring out a simple way to do the model. If that's a complicated step, you're doing it wrong. And then once you're up and operating, you can handle a tremendous amount through your chart of accounts. And really what you're shooting for there is you got to know your target margin. Right? Every farmer needs to know the difference between a margin and a markup. In that farm economics class, we talk about, 3 ways, how $3,000 can lose you 6, right? And we say, if you're making a 20% margin, and you go to a farmer's market and you bring an extra $1,000 worth of stuff that doesn't get sold, that costs you $800. Your cost is $800, and your margin would have been $200. So that costs you $800. If you under deliver by $1,000 of produce, that only costs you your profit. You only lost $200. So when you over deliver, you lost $800. When you under deliver, you lost $200. Now, if you really were to lose $1,000, and an easy way for a farmer to do that is to not collect, not receive the money that they're supposed to get, or you freeze out a greenhouse or something, lose a cooler or something. You really just lose money at 20%. You have to sell $5,000 of vegetables to make up $1,000 of loss. So there's three different scenarios that each cost you $1,000, right? $1,000 out the door actually costs you, offset $5,000 of revenue. Over delivering by $1,000 costs you $800, and under delivering by $1,000 only costs you $200, right? So we're talking about owning your clients and doing this different stuff. We have a rule of thumb where we just say, hey, we're going to overgrow by like 10%. And then, we might short a chef some arugula because we didn't grow enough, but usually there's something else there. There's a Tokyo bacana or peas or something else that we can kind of throw in, right, to kind of make it all work. So growing excess is also difficult. So when you see these farmers packing up after farmers markets, bringing that stuff home, it just breaks my soul. 50% of the produce grown in Missouri does not end up getting eaten. And I think that we need to be thinking about efficiency also in the context of waste and excess, right, and make sure that we're getting that part of the equation correct as well.
Greg, I'm feeling really excited after hearing you talk about this for the potential for somebody to really think things through, and really, I love all of this and the way it comes back to this intentional decision making. And I kind of want to close on that concept there of everything you've talked about today. From where we started with your passion for skill-based service all the way through talking about how much product to take to farmers market. I think it's such a, I want to come back to that intentional decision making. And I just think that's, to me, that term and the way that you've implemented that is really inspiring. Thank you so much.
Well, Chris, and I just, as a person who's, looked up to you for a long time and seen the wonderful things that you've been able to do in this space, and to now know that you're doing, things like this with the intention of helping people. This is literally your podcast in its own way is a perfect example of how you're using your skills to make a difference in this space. So I think that we share that passion, and it's fun to have a colleague that really looks at this thing in an analytical way at all four different types of sustainability, right? But then has also got the heart to be willing to share this. So I just personally appreciate who you are and what it is that you're doing, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, Chris.
All right. So wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 17 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast. You can find the notes for this show, all the links to at least a lot of the things that Greg mentioned. I tried to get them all are available at the farmertofarmerpodcast.com. That's farmer to farmer podcast, all spelled out.com. And you go there, you look on the episodes page, or you just search for Garbos, which is Garbos, and you'll find links to the books, to the resources, to the various companies, and even some of the people that Greg mentioned during his interview today. If you're not already listening to this show on iTunes, Stitcher, or the podcast app of your choice, I encourage you to subscribe to get the new episodes just as soon as they're released. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to leave a rating or a review on iTunes. The more fresh comments we get, the higher it drives the show in the iTunes ratings, which really does make a difference in how many people this show reaches. If you like what you hear, think about signing up for my newsletter, The Flying Rutabaga, at farmertofarmerpodcast.com or at purplepitchfork.com, where there's more information and resources for the consulting and education work that I do outside of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for this show. It's really a pleasure to be able to do these, and I've certainly enjoyed it. The feedback that we're getting is really great. I hope that you're enjoying it as much as I am. Take care, have a great week, and keep the tractor running.